An initiative petition has been filed to ask for a vote to raise Oklahoma City's minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour, the same proposed at the federal level by President Barack Obama. At the same time, State Senator Dan Newberry has filed a bill to block any municipality or other subdivision of the state to raise the minimum wage. As income disparity in the U.S. grows and the economy rebounds, clear lines are developing in the debate over minimum wage, an issue that is taking on added significance in an election year.
Since 2009, minimum wage workers have been making $7.25 an hour. President Barack Obama wants to increase the minimum wage, and he's urging voters to call their leaders in Washington to make it happen.
Right now, there's a bill in Congress that would boost America's minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. That's easy to remember, 10-10. And remember, the average worker who would get a raise if Congress acts is about 35 years old. Most low-wage jobs are held by women, and raising the minimum wage wouldn't just raise their wages. Its effect would lift wages for about 28 million Americans.
According to the Congressional Budget Office, raising the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour would lift nearly 1 million wage earners and their families out of poverty. People like C.J. Holland, who moved from California to Oklahoma, hoping his standard of living would improve.
I had left California coming here hoping it would be easier, but I didn't realize that the minimum wage is lower, so in the end, it's really no different.
Holland works at this Whataburger in Bartlesville, where he makes minimum wage. He doesn't have a car and has to pay $6 a day for transportation to work. $420 of his paycheck goes to child support.
And I get paid about $7.25 here, so it's really not much. I take about 50% of it, and then 10% goes to taxes. So in the end, I'm only living off 40% every 2 weeks, which is the reason why I'm living with my girlfriend's parents.
Holland says an increase to $10.10 an hour would give him a chance to get out of poverty. According to Gene Perry of the Oklahoma Policy Institute, some states have already recognized the need to pay higher wages for entry-level jobs.
Nationwide, 19 states have a minimum wage that's higher than the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. And just this year, 13 states have increased their minimum wage, including several that are connected to Oklahoma. Missouri and New Mexico and Colorado have all increased their minimum wage beginning in 2014.
But that's not likely to happen in Oklahoma. The state's minimum wage is the same as the federal, $7.25 an hour. Governor Mary Fallin recently said she is against raising the federal minimum wage because, quoting now, "I'm concerned that it would destroy jobs and especially small business owners who can't afford to increase their minimum wage." The Congressional Budget Office predicts increasing the federal minimum wage from $7.25 to $10.10 would result in the loss of 500,000 jobs by late 2016.
With respect to the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, they're just wrong in the sense that they are behind the interpretation of the recent data.
Dr. Scott Carter and Dr. Matthew Hendricks are professors of economics at the University of Tulsa. They say the CBO gives more weight to the opinions of a small number of economists instead of the conclusions of more than 600 economists, including 7 Nobel Prize laureates.
My interpretation of the literature in this area and the employment effects, along with almost every other economist in this area, and interprets that the results in this area as basically there's no effect of changes in the minimum wage and employment levels. In fact, if you were to take like a random draw of papers done in this area, by far the majority would find no effect on employment at all. But the really surprising thing is that the second largest group of papers that you would have in your stack would be a positive effect of the minimum wage on employment.
Dr. Carter says data on adjacent states and cities which have increased minimum wage prove that.
Over and over in community after community for the last 20 years, it has been demonstrated that raising the minimum wage does not adversely affect employment. In other words, it does not cause unemployment.
Tulsa-based Rib Crib Corporation employs between 1,200 and 1,500 people in 5 states. Mark Chastain is president of Rib Crib. He says the company would have to consider hiring fewer people if the minimum wage is increased.
If we raise the minimum wage from $7.25 an hour right now to $10.10 an hour, that could have more than a $500,000 immediate impact based on 2013 wages on our business. So the impact of a minimum wage increase like that would be substantial.
And Chastain adds the impact would really be much greater because only about 10% of Rib Crib's workforce makes minimum wage. 90% make $11 an hour or more.
If the minimum wage rate were raised that dramatically, there's going to be dramatic, in my opinion, dramatic upward impact on wage rates throughout our system.
Rib Crib has 51 stores and will be adding 2 more in the coming months. Whataburger has had the same 8 stores in Bartlesville and Tulsa since the 1950s. Owner Judy Gray says they won't reduce the number of employees if the minimum wage goes up. So your price of a burger would go up?
And sides and drinks and everything.
Do you think that would affect your business?
I think one of the things that we have going for us is that we've been here so long and people know the quality and they know us and they know that we aren't going to go up to price gouge or do any of this stuff, and I think they know that we have to.
Some economists and policy analysts say upping wages would spur the economy.
Upping the minimum wage at this point in the economy would be a much more efficient and effective way to boost the economy, because those are the folks who are going to go out and spend it immediately. They're not going to put it into savings. They're not going to maybe spend it in other states or on a vacation. They're going to invest it right back in Oklahoma.
That is how the chief of the Cherokee Nation, Bill John Baker, sees it too. He's raising the minimum wage of the Cherokee Nation to $9.50 an hour. It was already $1.75 higher than the federal minimum.
Those folks that are 9 that go to $9.50, it'll be like $1,000 a year more in their pocket that they can buy groceries or parts for their car or a down payment on a car. It'll make a big difference not only to those families, but it'll make a big difference to business people up and down Main Street.
Dr. Carter says increasing the pay for the lowest paid workers would have a reverberating effect throughout the whole wage structure. He says it would improve the economy by increasing the U.S. gross domestic product.
It is demonstrated, we know the evidence, that around 70% of all GDP comes out of consumption expenditure. Not investment expenditure, but consumption expenditure. And most of that consumption expenditure comes out of buying things that we need, not yachts, not the luxury goods that the wealthy are getting.
Political analysts don't believe Congress will pass a minimum wage increase this year, but believe it could be a key issue in the November elections. A recent survey by the Pew Center shows 2/3 of all Americans, Democrat, Republican, and Independent, want the minimum wage raised to $10.10 an hour.